Okay. So to make So this is a recipe I've been dealing with this for a little while, trying to perfect it. I don't really have much of a recipe per se. I'm not going to give you any actual recipe. If you want to learn, just pay attention, I guess. You're going to start with what the Cajuns call the Trinity, which is bell pepper, celery, and onion. You're also going to want a lot of garlic for that. I don't have any fresh garlic. I have this big thing of chopped garlic I bought for the apocalypse. You're also going to want some chicken, and you're going to want some sausage. Typically you want andouille. I have these real nice chorizo that I'm going to use. Organic chorizo. They look really, really nice. Typically you should use something smoked, something a little bit more like kielbasa than sausage, but this is what I have. I like to also put prawns in it. Instead I have this, I don't know if you can see that, it's like a lobster base, like a stock. So this is going to be sort of what we're going to be using here. What we're going to start, well, what I'm first going to do is I'm going to get everything ready. We're going to get the mise en scene. So I'm going to cut up all these vegetables and, yeah. You know, I've been thinking a lot about Spinoza since I did that video on substance. Spinoza is one of those philosophers that not enough people really deal with him. Everybody reads Descartes, right? In a philosophy classroom, any philosophy introductory class, you're going to be reading Descartes. But no one tends to put in the work to read the ethics. And I understand why. I mean, I can't say that I've fully, dove through the ethics. I've really only sunk my teeth into part one and some of his other stuff. But there's so much there. Like, he's one of those philosophers like Kant, like Descartes, like Hegel, that people have a very hard time getting over. And even though he was quite literally, I think he wrote the work in the 1660s, he wasn't published till after he was dead because he was considered a heretic in his community. Christians considered it a heretic. Spinozaism was a heresy. You could be burned at the stake for being a Spinozan. I'm just giving this all a rough chop here. Really, any size chop will be fine. Just kind of dice it up. Cut it whatever size you want. It's all going to cook down anyways. It doesn't all have to be uniform either. They're going to cook for a long time. So the thing about Spinoza and his ethics, I don't even think there was a published English translation till well into the 1800s. It was pretty much Hegel and the German Romantics, his ilk, Schelling, people like that, that really spurred on the public acceptance of Spinoza. But it's pretty well accepted that Hume, Leibniz, Kant, Locke, all the big philosophers of their time, the rationalists, the empiricists, they all really read Spinoza. They may not have said it. That's what people assume, at least. And it makes sense. I mean, he really is a big boy. So I guess one of the interesting things that he talked about was the idea of there only being one substance. And a lot of people, they have an idea of one substance, of monism. But it's matter, it's mind. It's kind of a reductive, which side wins. What Spinoza really the beauty of his system was he wanted a monism that contained both in an equal footing. So there wasn't one preceding the other. It wasn't that all mind was made out of matter. It wasn't that all matter was made out of mind. It was that all mind and matter was made out of God. So one of the reasons I think his conception of God as a singular substance is really interesting is because basically what he's going to do is he's going to take the whole problem of mind and matter and say, Well, neither of these are really substance to begin with, because substance needs to be infinite and not limited by anything outside of itself. It's kind of a weird conception of infinite, where what is infinite is something without borders, more than something with an infinite number, as we would associate it with. It's more a spatial infinite that he's thinking of. Geometric infinite might be a better way to think of it. And the idea behind it is basically, if God is infinite and substance is infinite, then everything, it takes place in God. And some people think Spinoza is a pantheist, right? Now, a pantheist says that everything is God. Now, is that actually what Spinoza is saying? Well, I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it seems to me that he's more saying everything is made up of God, more than everything is God. Like, people made the question, well, if everything is God, can we use it like a predicate? Like, for instance, we can say the bell pepper is red. Can we also say the bell pepper is God? And I think it's a tricky question with Spinoza, because ultimately the substance which makes up everything, including the bell pepper, is God. Can you use it as a predicate in the perhaps pantheist sense to say that this is God? Well, Spinoza scholars will debate that. Again, Spinoza, since most of his stuff was published after he died, his most important stuff, he couldn't answer a lot of these critics. And even if he could, most of his important critics weren't around until the 1800s, 200 years almost after he died. So unfortunately, he remains kind of a black box. I'm going to give these another chop this way, just kind of make them a little bit more bite-sized, and then I'm going to put them in a bowl over here. So, what Spinoza also does is, since everything comes from God, he's going to basically eliminate the idea of free will. He gives a strange idea of a house with a rock on it. Maybe I should hold off on this. Yeah, let's keep going on substance, actually. So why is the idea of a single substance of God, why is it useful? Well, I think it's useful to really dive into why he thinks this way, right? So, if mind and matter were substances, they would both be limited by one another, in the sense that there would be a border between mind and matter. And so neither could truly be infinite. But substance, again, as it's being defined by Spinoza, is infinite. So clearly, mind and matter, as they exist, couldn't be everything. There would need to be something which was further, right? Because if God isn't infinite, right, then God must be further than both mind and matter. And for all the talk of Spinoza being an atheist, he really, really tries hard to defend the existence of God, although it's a bit different of a God. It's more the universe or nature as God. So then what are bodies and minds? Well, they're limited, right? So what Spinoza is going to do is he's basically going to say body and mind, or as he puts it in Descartes' terms, thought and extension, right? Minds and bodies, but he puts it thought and extension, that those are both attributes of God. But he doesn't just simply say that then God is this, right? God is the totality of minds and bodies, of thought and extension. What he's going to say is that there are an infinite number of attributes to God. So what this means is that where we have thought and extension that make up everything that we see, that is just two of the infinite attributes of God. God is this sort of never-ending, the substance, right, that is God, is this never-ending, infinite, active working out of itself, not simply through minds and bodies, but through an infinite number of ways that we couldn't even conceive. It's quite spectacular, actually, when you kind of try to wrap your brain around it. That where everyone's trying to deal with minds and bodies and whatnot. Spinoza opens it up for literally an infinite number of other cases that we couldn't even conceive of as humans. This isn't the nicest looking onion in the world, but it's the apocalypse, you gotta make do. Again, none of this, the chopping, none of it really matters how much of whatever. I mean, as long as you got all the right stuff, it's gonna cook for a long time. It's gonna come out delicious. Yeah, you know what? Looking at that onion, I'm grabbing another half of an onion because some of this I had to throw out. It just wasn't quite good. Apocalypse. So we're gonna chop all this up for you. So basically, if we're trying to think about it concretely, my eyes are kind of watering right now, so give me just a sec. This onion, oh jeez, its substance is God, in the sense that the furthest underlying infinite, indivisible element of it is God, necessarily. But it as its attribute of God, which it takes up, or which it partakes in, is extension, in the sense that it exists as a physical thing that takes up space and has weight and all that sort of stuff. But it as an onion, as a particular with color, it being white, being wet, making my eyes water, that is a particular mode. So you kind of have like a hierarchy. You have substance, which is this infinite thing which everything partakes in, which is God. You have these attributes of which we have access to two of. The things partake in these attributes to various degrees, those being, determinate degrees, should I say, those being thought and extension. And then you have modes, which is where thought and extension take up all their different sorts of shapes, all their forms, all the different things you think of as thoughts and bodies. Okay, I have a giant heaping bowl of vegetables. This is what you want to see. This is the trinity. This is the onions, the celery, and the bell peppers. I'm going to get cleaned up a little bit, and then we'll move on to starting to cook the meats. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to heat up this pot here. I'm going to basically do everything in one pot. So that's kind of why I want to get everything ready beforehand. What I'm going to also do while this pot is heating up is I'm going to mix up some of this broth so it'll be ready right to pour in. I'm also going to get ready a little bit of wine to deglaze. I don't know if I have enough wine here. I'm going to open up another bottle probably for this. You don't really need the wine. and you can use any stock you want. Typically, chicken stock would be a little more traditional, probably. And what I would also typically be doing is, before I would be cooking the meat, I would be rendering out a little bit of fat, pork fat. Pork fat, I believe, is the more traditional way to do it. I'm very far from the south, so if anyone is a little more local than I am, I'm sure you can correct me in the comments. I think the traditional way to do it is with pork fat. Typically what I do is I buy a little bit of pork belly and I render that out first, and then I put the pork belly in, and it's really good, but I don't have any pork belly. So what I'm just going to use is some canola and avocado oil. It's like a blend, because I was too cheap to buy pure avocado oil and be a real hipster. As far as cooking the meats and the sort of stuff, you want to use something with a high smoke point. This is why the avocado canola oil is going to work really well. It does have a high smoke point, so you can get it up quite high. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing the roux at a very high temperature. You don't have to do the roux as hot as I do it. I don't know. I got really lazy when I first started making roux, and I just started doing it really, really quick. And then I found out a little bit later that that's totally not how you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to do it real slow. I mean, if you wanted to do this, since we're going to get a real dark roux, I mean, 40 minutes. If you wanted to do it low and slow, I'm just going to bang it out. That's why we're going to have everything real quick. We're going to get it all done, throw everything together. It's going to be beautiful. Okay, so I have the oil like nice and smoking right now, so I'm going to get the chicken. Throw it in away from you if you're smart, unlike me. Add about 5 chicken thighs. And they say don't overcrowd the pan. And I agree. But make do. Now you don't actually need to cook these all the way through. They're going to be cooked for quite a while when this all comes together. What you just really want to get is a real good color on them. Get it up real nice and high. And building up a little bit of fond. The little crispy bits at the bottom, that's also quite nice. Okay, so I'm starting to get a bit of color on them, as I'm sure you can see. So, I'll give them a flip. I like kind of sticking to the pan stuff. Oh, that's not quite enough color on that one. What do you want to see? Oh, we got a little more color. But the rest is looking great. Grab some of the little bits off the bottom. Now, what's really nice is, grab the phone. This sort of stuff on the bottom, it's called fond. It's what you want to see, but you don't want it to burn, which is why I'm not going to hold this camera for very long. Put a little more oil in there. Even though we got quite a bit. I'm going to cook the sausage. Same thing goes with the sausage. You just basically want it cooked enough that it has color. It's got a little bit of, that nice sausage color on both sides. And you want it to be cooked enough that you can cut it nice and easy, but it's going back in to be cooked eventually. This isn't the first time this isn't the last time it's being cooked. Okay, I'm going to pull the sausage out now. Okay, so what I'm going to start doing now Now add a lot of oil. Okay, so what we're going to start doing is building a roux. Now, if you've never built a roux before, be careful. So all a roux really is fat and flour. Got a little bit of flour here. Kind of want it to look like should be getting a much better mixer. What am I doing? This was a terrible idea. Give me just a minute. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm going to try to scrape up everything off the bottom so it doesn't burn. All that fond and everything. Now typically with a fond you shouldn't be doing it like this. What you should be doing is it very slow with no fond in it, with just a clean pan with some high smoke point oil and flour. But I play by I play on the edge. I live on the edge. I'm a dangerous individual. So basically what I do is I just do it all and I wing it. Now this is actually, it's kind of double dangerous because roux burn very easily. So if I'm not watching this closely, and we want to get it very dark too, so we're going to be cooking it for a while. If I don't pay attention to this, I'm going to burn it. And also if I don't pay attention to it, I'm going to burn the fond as well, which we don't want. We don't want to burn anything. That's going to mean a lot of scraping and a lot of stirring. The other thing about roux is it may not look like it, but this is like equivalent to what you deep fry chicken in. It is like magma. If it gets on you, you are going to feel it. So I just got a little drip on my... Oh, you feel it. So you can see already the color's changed. It was quite white when I first put it in, like a white foam. And now it's turning... I could even use a little bit more flour, but you know, I think this is going to work out perfect. It's going to get darker as it goes, and what we kind of want to see is it's going to start to look like chocolate, and that's right around right before it burns, basically. So we're playing with fire here. We're going right to the edge. What again you should be doing if you don't have very much experience with this stuff is be doing it very slow. It's probably a little too hot. Probably a little too hot. A little quieter, we can talk about Spinoza again. So he kind of had two ideas of nature, because he didn't think of God as nature, basically, or the universe, as I said earlier. And one of the ways he conceives of this is two terms, natura naturans and natura naturata. Now, I hope I get this correct, because I don't speak Latin, so I'm just going by memory here. Natura naturans means nature naturing, and natura naturata means nature natured, or naturing nature and natured nature, sometimes translated. And I think this is a pretty good... it's a really interesting breakdown of his conception of God, because if we consider sort of it almost as God godding and God godded, I think would be an easy way to conceive of it as well. Maybe handy. Oh yeah, see, that's kind of what we want to see. It feels like a sandy kind of. And it's turning nice and chocolatey. So it's just another minute or two. Oh, and you can really smell it now. It's starting to smell like the toasty, like the smell of all the raw flour is gone. It starts to smell like a roux. It starts to smell like a roux. It's delicious baked flour in butter. Or not butter. You can't use butter in this case. Butter will burn. You have to use some of the high smoke point. Okay, natura naturata. We're going to continue on with that thought, but everything's going to come together very quickly here. Once this roux is done, which it's pretty much done right now, we're going to throw everything together and we're going to start cooking it. Now, because this is like molten oil right now, this stuff is going to basically be like deep frying as soon as it hits the pan. So this is why you need to have everything ready, you're deglazing, everything. Okay, so here we go. First things first, the Trinity goes in. So the vegetables are going to hug up all that that oil and that flour. I'm going to add a little bit more oil. And because it's so hot, you may not seem it, but it's really hot right now. All these vegetables are going to cook really, really quickly. Which is why we're also not adding the garlic just yet, because it'll burn. So what I like to do at this point is to start to season. I could have seasoned my chicken with salt and pepper, but I didn't really. I don't know, it might be a lot of salt. Now, the thing about pepper, you want a lot of pepper. You want a lot of pepper. So this is just like my first round of pepper. There's going to be more coming, but just to get these vegetables nice and seasoned. So now what I also want to do is I'm going to deglaze, no, I'm not going to deglaze yet. What I'm going to do, sorry, a lot of steps. I'm going to add rice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the rice. There's about 2 cups of rice. Hope this pot's going to be big enough. I'm also going to add some Cajun seasoning I have here, which is basically just red pepper, salt, dehydrated vegetables, garlic, onion, red bell pepper, brown sugar. It's not all that fancy, but it tastes good. So I'm going to put some of this in. I'm going to put some chili powder in. Smoked paprika would also probably work pretty well here. I don't have any smoked paprika. Lots of chili powder, lots of that. And then we just kind of want to toast this rice. You can all smell this. I have some broth. I hope you can see that over here. Maybe I'll scooch it over a little bit. This is about 4 cups of the lobster broth I whipped up. It might be a little bit stronger than normal. I'm aiming for about 2 cups of rice to about 6 cups of liquid. So this is about 4 cups of broth. And then I also have somewhere around here. I also have some tomatoes. Again, I'm not local. Someone can correct me. I think tomatoes typically aren't traditional. I think it's more of a New Orleans style, something like that. But I really like them in there, so I'm going to put some in. What do I do now? Okay, so I'm toasting the rice. I've toasted the spices. I think I should deglaze. Deglaze. Put the tomatoes in the sauce. Yeah, okay. We're all looking good. A lot of steps on one. Oh no, I almost did. Garlic. See? Sometimes you almost forget one of the most important things. So fresh garlic would be much better than this stuff, but since I have this stuff, that's what I have. I'm gonna put a lot in. Because I find this stuff, it doesn't have as much kick as regular garlic. You can kind of go crazy with it. Also, if you had a hot pepper, like jalapeno or habanero or anything like that, now would be a good time to put it in there. I don't think I have anything like that. Let me check my fridge real quick. You only really want the garlic in there for all of 30 seconds or so, because the pot is still very hot. Garlic burns very easy. I got some Greek pepper. I don't know if that'll work. I want a little bit of chili just for the hell of it. Not very much. Okay, so I'm going to deglaze this now. That is definitely not enough wine. That was great. You don't actually have to use wine here. You could just use your stock. Or you could use beer. Basically, you just want enough liquid at the bottom just to lift everything up. Make sure nothing's sticking at the bottom. And all those little cooked on bits are all mixed in there, because that's where flavor is. I think this should be pretty much good. Okay. Everything looks beautiful over here, so I'm going to add the stock in. And you spill it all over the place. Oh, that's too bad. Okay, so that's about 4 cups. This guy. But not even a cup. I'll throw in a few of these. These will all fall apart as they cook, so it doesn't really matter. I'm also going to slice up the sausage. See how it looks like a rabid animal? Just tore it up. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. And in fact, you can just throw all the chicken in too, with your bare hands like this. It's all going to fall apart as it cooks. And the last bit of that juice from the chicken. So, there's actually a couple schools of thought as far as I know about this. Some people would recommend, basically what you do is you put everything together up until right before the rice, basically. But you put in the garlic and the vegetables and everything with the stock, and then you cook that for a good hour. And then you add the rice later with the chicken and sausage, and then cook that even longer. Personally, kind of lazy, and I haven't found much of an issue cooking it all like this. The tricky part that I find sometimes, though, is because you want to get it up really high to cook out, you know, all the little bits of tinniness from the pasta and the flour, any of the raw flour still left in it or anything like that. You can overcook the rice a little bit. So if you want to do it foolproof, like 100% foolproof, what you should do is just leave the rice out, okay? You can even put the chicken and the sausage in, that doesn't really matter, but leave the rice out. Boil this for an hour, 2 hours, as long as you really want to. And then once you have that exactly the way you want it, add cooked rice. I've done it before, it works. it's not quite as good as when you get it perfect and it manages to suck up all the delicious broth we got going on here. But it works. It works in a pinch, and it's much easier to do. It has a much higher success rate. You are going to get some rice at the bottom that's stuck usually, and it's actually really, really delicious. But it's nice if that forms later on in the process rather than earlier. Okay, this looks perfect. We can get this up to a boil. So while I'm waiting for this to boil, and I'm kind of just puttering, putting some stuff away, let's get back to Natura Naturans, Natura Naturata. It's an interesting distinction because God as sort of two there almost seems to be a dualism. You can see it right off the bat that there is the attributes, or should I say the modes made out of the attributes of God, and there is the substance of God, right? And it seems like there is almost like a bit of a divide there. But he's not trying to set up another set of dualism between sort of like God and the creation on the other side, much in the way the Judeo-Christian model would have it, a transcendent God. For God, in the Spinozan sense, there is no transcendence. There is no above. There is no outside. It's all within. It's all part of it already from the beginning. It is the very substance which makes up everything. So Natura Naturans, I think I'm saying that right, that is basically like the active element of God, the process of the whole thing, the necessary movement of that substance by which attributes develop and form modes. Natura Naturata, nature-natured, is the passive elements of God. The elements of God like the onion or, the soup pot. It's an element which, although it is still part of God, it is not the process by which the thing was brought into being. So the active sort of movement of substance, the self-generative, the self-organizing power of it, that is the necessary element, Natura Naturans, the sort of will of God, to try to put it in a Judeo-Christian framework. Whereas Natura Naturata, that would be the creation of God, the material world. Now, for the Christian, or the Jew, for the Judeo-Christian, the idea of God basically stands as, what would you say? The act of creation, the act of making a passive element, is not only strictly outside of God, in the sense that God isn't the world, he made the world and is outside of it, transcends it, but also that God made the world almost on a whim, like caprice. He chose out of his free will to make the world, but it was his own choice. Had he decided not to create anything outside of himself, he would have been free to. For Spinoza, it's totally the opposite. God himself needs, the necessary element of God is for the world to exist. There isn't like a presupposing of God who exists before creation. God himself, Natura Naturata, is that process of creation. So when we think about it in the Judeo-Christian sense, although it is a free will, he wants to say it is a free will, because again, it's infinite. And since it's infinite, there's nothing outside of it. And since there's nothing outside of it, there's nothing to limit its will. Therefore, it must be free. In fact, it's the only thing that can be free because it's infinite, it's not limited by another body. But at the same time, that free will necessitates the creation of the world. And if you're familiar with Leibniz, for instance, Leibniz thinks that there is that we are in the best possible world. That there's a bunch of possible instances of the way that the world could have been made, but God made it this way for a reason. That it would be whatever's happening now, even if it seems bad, it's going to lead to the best possible outcomes in the future. We live in the best possible timeline, so to speak, to use a modern sort of turn of phrase. For Spinoza, there's only one necessary timeline. There is nothing outside of God and his necessary movement, his necessary will. And that necessary will, of course, is free because it's not limited, but it's also necessary in the sense that it doesn't exist as caprice. It doesn't exist as just a free choice that he was able to make. It's actually part of his constitution. It's part of his existence. One last thing I forgot about the jambalaya. You want to put in a shitload more pepper. You basically want to put in pepper until your arm hurts. Okay, that should be good. Okay. Oh my gosh, that smells so good. Okay, so that's the last necessary step, I believe. I'm going to turn this right down. One last thing. Pass over. I can already feel some stuff getting stuck to the bottom, but again, that's part of the process. It's going to be good. It's actually like that in some rice dishes like paella. You're aiming for that little bit of crust at the bottom. That's like the best part. Okay, so now this is boiling. I'm going to cover it up. I'm going to leave it for half hour, maybe 40 minutes, maybe longer. We're going to see. I'm going to come back in about a half hour and we're going to check it out and we're going to see how it's doing. I was uploading some clips, but it's been about a half hour and this is what it's looking like. I gave it a nice stir. My God. So basically what I've done is I have turned the heat, well now I've turned the heat off, and that's going to sit for another little while. Let everything kind of cool down, let all the excess moisture get soaked up there, but my God, it's looking good. Spinoza's answer to the mind-body problem is sort of bizarre. He actually believes in parallelism, which is, it's basically the idea where mind and body, thought and extension, although they both correspond perfectly to one another, a la Descartes, they actually have no interaction with one another. So where Descartes says that the interaction is mediated and thus guaranteed through God, Spinoza believes that basically God moves both mind and substance, thought and extension, in identical ways because, again, they are the same substance. It's the same movement. It's just different attributes of that same movement. Parallelism is... It's a tricky one to wrap your brain around, but again, it's a very interesting objection to Descartes, solution to Descartes. I don't know. It depends how you think about it. Okay, I almost forgot something important. I have some of this stuff. It's called filet. Filet? I think it's called filet. Never actually said it out loud or heard anyone say it out loud, I don't think. It's sassafras. You don't put it in when you're cooking. You put it in right at the end. So, still probably bubbling just a little bit. So I'm just going to stir that in right now. Doing this one-handed is going to be nearly impossible, but I'll do my best. I have to be totally honest here. I don't really know what I'm doing. That'll be enough. Let me put in a little more. I'm fucking terrible at filming this and doing stuff at the same time. So this stuff, I haven't cooked with it all that much. I only bought it because I like making jambalaya and gumbo and stuff like that, Cajun food, and I heard this was like a secret. So yeah, I'm just going to stir that in at the very end, which I can't really do one-handed, so I'm going to put you guys down. And then we're just going to let this set up, and I'm going to put it in a bowl. This looks absolutely delicious. one of my better batches. It's not too bad. It's a bit of a tradition for me to dive into my jambalaya way too early and burn my tongue, so I can't taste it properly for the rest of however many days I'll eat this. So, natura naturans, natura naturata, creative God, created God. They're two sides of the same coin. They're both God. And in that sense, it's really an attack on the Judeo-Christian models of God with the transcendent ideas of a creator. But it's not just the idea of transcendence in God that it's attacking, but also sort of the idea of sentience or choice, right? Again, it's a free will, but it's a necessary will. There isn't caprice. There isn't free choice in the sense that we would assume. And this goes for humans as well as God. The entire system it's mechanistic. It's causes and effects. It isn't choices and caprice, random events. Spinoza gives the example of a rock on a roof, and it falls and it kills somebody. And typically what people will do is they're going to look for a reason. So they'll ask, well, why did the rock fall from the roof? Well, perhaps there was a great gust of wind. Well, why was there a great gust of wind, right? And you can go farther back and farther back. Why was the person coming to your house? Well, they were making a cake and they needed a cup of sugar. Why did they need a cup of sugar? Well, it was their grandniece's birthday. Why was it their grandniece's birthday? You can go on for an infinite sort of chain here. And the typical Aristotelian sort of take on it is that means that the prime mover, the ultimate cause of all causes, is God. And while I think that's apt in Spinoza's sense, what he wants to do is attack the idea of purpose. There is no purpose out of all of it. The rock killing the man, it wasn't because God decided the man should die. It was simply the mechanistic working out of causes and effects. In fact, he says people that appeal to God in this sort of sense of infinite regress, he says it's something like the last refuge of the ignorant. He doesn't put any weight into things like miracles, for instance. Miracles are treated as... There is always a rational and mechanistic explanation to miracles. And he gives a similar explanation to human bodies. That people are amazed by human bodies in the same way they're amazed by a work of art. But it would just be as irrational to assume that therefore the human body must have come about through creative means, but that it couldn't have been formed by mechanism. There are plenty of things, including works of art, which are formed by mechanism, because everything is a mechanism. Literally everything. It's just a giant working out of a machine god. It's a god without any sentience. It's a god that literally, quite literally, is the totality of process and processed. It's pretty deep. It's kind of hard to grapple with a lot of the time, because it's a pretty big step outside of traditional approaches to metaphysics in general. And I think it's one of the reasons why Deleuze has been so influenced by him as well, is because he stands as one of those big kind of escape points from traditional Western philosophy all the way back to Aristotle. And I also think he's not really going anywhere, you know? I mean, the Inquisition couldn't kill him. Literally, the entire church tried to outlaw his work and wipe him off the face of the earth. He's still here. Can't get rid of that guy.